Welcome, everyone, and welcome to Maryland Online's webinar, WCAG, Title II in April 2026. The race is on. Our presenter today is Debbie Dorsey. She is an associate professor of health at Harford Community College. Debbie is a Maryland Distance Learning Association board member, Quality Matters peer review, and a 2020 NISOT Excellence Award recipient. I am Ron Hansen. I am your moderator today, and I'll be helping monitor the chat. And Debbie, I'm going to stop sharing and let you go, and we're on our way.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I do recognize some names. And as Ron said, I'm Debbie Dorsey, and I have been at this accessibility game now for quite some time. I like to tell people that I am not an expert, I am learned. And so today, what we're going to talk about is, we're very close to the deadline. We've got to hit these, benchmarks, these WCAG 2A AA standards. So that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about today. And I always turn my camera off when I go into my presentation. So just, you won't see me, but I'm here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with our presentation. And if, are you able to see me? Or I'm sorry, are you able to see the,
Yes.
okay, great. Awesome. All right. So I know I tweaked the title a little bit. I now call it WCAG Title 2 in April 2026, the last lap, because we're almost there, right? We're like 3 months away, maybe even not that much. So we're going to just touch on a few things. But before we get started, I'd like to know who is in the room with me. And so if you would type into the chat. Oop, I'm bringing this down here. Where's my chat? There we go. For some reason, mine is not working nicely for me. Let me move you guys out of the way. There we go. All right. I've got some faculty. Okay. Administrator. Very nice. I've got a little mix of everybody. All right. So, depending on what your role is at the institution that you are at, you're probably coming at this from a slightly different angle. We all have the same goal, obviously, but I will tell you that I'm coming at this from a faculty perspective. And so, even if you are not faculty in the room with us right now, I find that it is helpful for me to talk about it in a way that how faculty feels about it, because ultimately, what we need to do is get faculty as well as our support staff. If you are working in e-learning and you're a course designer, you're helping faculty, just to kind of understand where we're coming from here. And so today, let's see here, there we go. Talk a little bit about the main takeaways from the DOJ ruling. And we'll talk a little bit about how your institution has started this process. I did this presentation last year, and in just a year, I had to add some stuff. And a lot of it is, as we would expect, AI, right? We've made a lot of progress with AI, and it's been very helpful to those of us who are making our content accessible. But just so we're all on the same page, what we need to do, what the DOJ has said is, if you take our federal funds, if you are accepting money from us, then you need to meet at least the WCAG 2.1 AA standards. And I don't want everybody to start going, oh my goodness. But some of y'all might know that there are now updated standards. And when I sort of look at and I ask the question, all right, when is that going to change for us? The answer is always a little ambiguous, but there are some people in the field of accessibility who are starting to say, maybe take a little bit of a look at the newer, the 2.2, but and I'm reluctant to say that to our group because I don't want people to start panicking, but I do want to plan it there that there will come a time where these standards, this 2.1 AA, it's not a permanent thing. We're going to have to look at this because our technology evolves. We're going to have to kind of look at this as a fluid process. So here are the fundamentals. And again, remember, I'm coming at this from the faculty perspective. Things need to be perceivable, operable, and understandable. So perceivable, that means that the user, the learner, the student has to be able to recognize our electronic information. So that's our text, our images, our video. Operable means they need to be able to move around with all kinds of devices. So not just a mouse. A lot of people will use screen readers and then they're using their keyboard. And our stuff has to work and be operable across all of those different accessibility equipment. In higher ed, understandable is a little tricky because we're different. WCAG 2.1 AA, this doesn't just apply to us. There are commercial websites, there are .govs that are needing to bring themselves up to these standards as well. And so what is considered understandable in Amazon is going to be different, right, than what we have to put into higher ed. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. Robust, this is a big one, right? So what we're saying here is, I'm sorry, you'll hear me pause from time to time because my throat tends to dry out as I'm talking, that no matter where our content lives, it needs to be operable and perceivable. That includes AI, our virtual reality, our interactives, and our mobile apps. And just to kind of go off to a side for a second here, as we were getting started, Ron and I were talking a little bit about mobile apps and how do you check them to see if they're meeting the standards. And one of the nice things about mobile apps are that iOS, Android, they're pretty much not going to do business with you unless your app fits within their native accessibility features, right? So me personally, this is just my opinion, I don't think we're going to have as many problems with the mobile apps as we are going to see, obviously, with the webs, right? So big difference here. In the difference between A and AA means that you got to do everything that A said. Plus, we're really looking at caption videos. We need to make sure that things can go into dark mode and colorblind modes. And again, there's that operable piece. I need to be able to maneuver around in your site without any issues, right? So who does this apply to as well? Anybody that you're going to do business with, anybody that you pay, that your institution has a financial relationship with, it's got to meet those standards. So we're talking about our LMS, the course registration that students use, cloud-based subscription, so like 365 Pilot, and publishers. And that one is what I'm sort of interested in myself is to kind of see how that evolves over time, because I think that higher ed may have the advantage here in that with the pushes for OERs, that the publishers are going to have to do their best to retain their clients, for lack of a better word. And so it'll be interesting to see how they really go about this and trying to get their content to be accessible. So third parties, these are our linked resources. And so this is any company that develops and manages or supports these things. They need to comply with it as well. So again, we're talking about our LMS's native features, right? The ability to submit a quiz, to look at announcements, basically navigate around in through the LMS. We're also looking at those third-party embedded. So your textbook publisher, again, Microsoft 365, we know that we can create content with it. At my institution, we use something called Soft Chalk. You may be familiar with it. It's basically you can create learning content there. But here's the thing, this was always the gray area prior to this ruling. What about third parties that leave the LMS? And for a while, we used to say, well, I think we have some wiggle room here. And we really don't anymore. Okay, so now if you take someone out of your LMS to a different website, whether it's an edu, .gov, .org, .com, it needs to meet those standards. And what you see right here is what will soon be Debbie freaking out trying to find a replacement for this. I teach nutrition and we use a application called Chronometer. You may or may not be familiar with it. And it is a very robust, for the free version, all of the different features that you can, it just gives so much information back to the student. And I use it. I use it throughout the semester. And here it is. Everybody can see the website. Yes. I'm gonna assume silence always means yes. Can you see this, Ron?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
Yes.
awesome. And if you are unfamiliar, there is a plugin called HTML Code Sniffer. It's great because what it'll do, watch when I hit it. Oh my Lord. There's 135 red zone errors. So, what do these different things mean? Basically, it's about navigation and perceivability. It is almost impossible to get a website that hits zero red zone errors. And I'm not going to go in too much into what red zone errors usually are, but oftentimes what it is operability. It's difficult to maneuver around in your site, which makes sense, right? Because this is like an interactive. You can plug in information here and play around with the different numbers. We've got things like menus that we can change and maneuver around in. And what this is telling me is I gotta find something else. I have to figure out another tool. And when I am making a decision about a third party website, I try to keep my red zone errors under 20, 25 at the most. When we start going above 20, now we're really having to worry whether or not that student is going to be able to understand and move around in that website. So, going to spend my spring break in a fun way trying to figure out a substitution for this. But again, the nice thing perhaps about this website is that there's an app, that's what they use. And we know that apps, like I said before, they're doing a bit of a better job than the web versions at meeting these standards. So I'm going to throw some stuff out here today as faculty that sort of is a question. So right now, according to the DOJ, an institution is not legally responsible, faculty, this is us, if the content that we put in our course, we label it optional, supplemental, not required for participation, grading, or essential course functions. Okay, so I'm not sure how I feel about that. And the question then is, and it's danger Will Robinson, I don't know, because to me, why do we use supplemental information in the first place? If we didn't need it, then why would we put it into our course? And the reason is it deepens understanding. Would this not then impact assessment? A student who has a deeper understanding of the subject matter has an advantage than a student who was unable to get to that thing that you labeled as supplemental. And again, I think that this is creating a disparity. We also say that, of course, we use the supplementals to encourage curiosity. Again, going to put it out there. Does that also not impact assessment? Let's say you have a discussion board and we all sort of know, right? Read this, make a comment, respond. Well, you've got a student who's used the supplemental who is going to have more of a robust answer for as they're putting in their discussion board posting. And we as faculty, even though again we try to be as I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, fair and honest in our grading, when we see a student who has put a little bit more into what they have turned in, we're going to look at that and quite frankly, the inclination is going to give them, the A because they went the extra yard. At our institution, we call it mastery when we look at our different criteria for describing our students in assessment. Mastery means you know this thing. Well, that means that you got the highest grade. And again, I would argue, are you at an unfair advantage if even though the content said it was optional, you still were able to get to it, whereas another student was not? So these are the things that we need to be thinking about because what I'm thinking is, does that still put an institution vulnerable to a lawsuit? So here's what's kind of weird to me, and I'm not exactly sure how to interpret it, but getting to your records and your report cards through a secure online portal doesn't have to meet the standards, which I think is very unusual, right? Like our students, I'm at a community college, so our students are definitely going to want to get into their academic records. We're talking about transfer, going into a job. And so it strikes me as odd that this group is sort of getting to get a pass in all of this. And I don't know how long that'll last. But ultimately, what we want to look at as faculty is that if a student must understand your material to succeed in your course, then it needs to be accessible. It needs to meet WCAG standards. And again, that student could have a legal argument potentially if a third-party supplemental is not accessible. Here is my concern where this goes as faculty. The easiest way to resolve that is to just not provide your supplemental information anymore. And that is a concern that I have, that as we go through this, that things that made our courses great courses, really interesting, if the perception is that it's too much work to make sure that all of this is accessible, I am concerned that that could potentially affect the quality of our courses, the information that we give to our students. And I don't know, I'm kind of taking a stand back, see how it goes. Maybe I will be pleasantly surprised, but just in my conversations with my faculty colleagues, just in sort of informal conversations, I've heard that pop up. Well, if I don't need to use it, then I'm not going to use it. Remember, too, that we have to assume that every student that is sitting there in a classroom, because this does apply to our classrooms, right? Because we use our LMS as supplemental. They don't need to identify to us that they have assistive technology. And we still have to meet those standards. And this is where, and I think it's improving, but this is where a lot of conversations will also happen with faculty because they don't understand the difference between accommodations and accessibility, right? There are overlap, but they're also two different things, right? And if your course, what I try to say to faculty is, if your course is meeting accessibility standards, it's not going to be that greater of a step for a student who has accommodations and maybe they're a little different than your standard for them to do well in your course. But we still need to see them as two separate things, and you still need to make sure that your course, your material, your electronic content are hitting those standards. So I showed you the HTML code sniffer, and it is a nice tool. I suppose just like we have, we have to be careful with all plugins. It's only going to last as long as the creator keeps it up to date, right? So I'm always waiting for HTML code sniffer to sort of stop working as nicely as it is right now. There is one that is also image alt text. And see, I just put it in here. You can see here, and this is telling me a little bit about why my website is hitting those 135 errors, right? There's missing alt text attributes. There's all this stuff, right? So this one is just focusing on the alt text, this alt text image plugin. But sometimes I put them up side by side to see a bit like, what's the relationship between the two of them. And almost always, if I've got, over 25 red zone errors, then of course I'm going to see alt text issues. Here's the thing, and I know this is very wordy, but I thought this was kind of a cool thing for us to look at. Again, since the year that I did this a year ago, we were at a place where you had to have the paid version of ChatGPT to upload an image and be able to get ChatGPT to give us the alt text. And now we don't have to. I think probably ChatGPT limits how many you can do on their free version. We at the college have Copilot. And I'm going to show you a little bit of the difference between the two. So if I get to use Copilot for free, essentially, that's what I'm going to go to. And so right here, this is, of course, everyone's favorite photosynthesis, right? And I put the image into ChatGPT, and it provided fairly nice, good, detailed information about what this image is. And of course, as faculty, I'm always going to want to go in here and use this as a jump off point, right? So there may be some things about this picture that I want it to stand out a bit more. Here's the thing. I embed this image. We are a Brightspace campus. Brightspace will not allow me to put this much alt text into it's what it requires you to do, right? I put the image in and then it says you have to put alt text in. It will not, it probably will take maybe to here. Actually, let me go back to maybe the second sentence. And so this is where I sort of come at a crossroads of, all right, well, we know that alt text has to be there in such a way that the person doesn't have to rely on the surrounding text to understand what that picture is, right? It's almost as if it has to be this standalone thing. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying to myself, okay, well, what if this description here is really what I want students to know, but my LMS is not allowing me to put that much into it? And so I've been to accessibility conferences before, like AHEAD, where we have some of these conversations. And it's about specifically accessibility as it pertains to education. And the question that I posed was, okay, is it acceptable if I really feel like this is the alt text that I want? Is it acceptable for me to put in my alt text? Please see the description of this image below. And I never got a really good answer. From a commercial perspective, no, I can't do that. But this is again where we talk about understandable, right? That part of WCAG that says our things need to be understandable. It is different for us in higher education. So this is Copilot, and I'm going to put them side by side in just a few seconds here. It's a little different. PowerPoint said a diagram of a plant growing from the ground. right? So, hey, that would fit into my LMS's alt text, right? But again, we just, oh my goodness, we cannot rely on our publishing applications like Word and all that in order to generate good alt text. So let's look at these side by side. And you can see Copilot gave a little bit more of a description than ChatGPT did. And this again is what we typically find. You can see that Copilot said, hey, wait, there's small blue shapes representing the nutrients in the soil. Whereas ChatGPT was more like just the facts. Copilot tends to give a little bit more descriptive sort of colors and shapes, and that's been my observation. So, institutions who will succeed. And I know just about everybody here, I'm sure, cannot sit pretty in this room and say, we're ready. It's April 2026. We are compliant, right? That would be difficult for me to believe. But I do believe we are probably all in different states of readiness. For faculty, we need to change the culture, how we see accessibility. Um, we need to recognize that there's going to be different motivators between our administrators and our faculty and our support staff. What motivates us to get compliant, totally different, right? If you go at faculty and say, we can get sued if you do not make your stuff accessible. I know my faculty colleagues are going to say, "Oh well, that doesn't motivate us." Right? We're like, yes, we like our jobs, but that creates, I think, too much of a divide between people, groups of people on campus who should be working together in order to make this happen. So when we talk to faculty and we try to encourage them, motivate them, hey, look, you gotta meet these standards. It's important. What is helpful to us is if you explain how it impacts the student. And a good analogy that I always use is this. If you were standing in a classroom and you were showing something up on your screen, and everyone was looking at it, and you stood directly in front of one of your students and blocked their ability to see what you were showing, would you ever do that? And of course, the answer is hopefully no. But that is exactly what is happening in your online course when you do not put things into the course that meet these accessibility standards. So please come at us with good analogies, things that we can wrap our head around, how it affects the student. That really helps motivate us to start adopting those skills that we need to apply in order to bring ourselves up to the WCAG requirements. Also, probably a good idea to retain a law firm that understands ADA. And I am not sure, I have to be very careful how I tread here, but it has been my observation that that is not always the case, that the attorneys that institutions retain don't really know ADA that well. And so that is something that I'm gonna plug, I'm just gonna put it out there. Keep in mind, you probably want to have someone who understands this. And adopting the VPAT system, right? Hopefully everybody's doing that. That's going to be a big part of meeting accessibility standards for our ITS and those who are making decisions about software. So here's the one that's always going to be the issue, right? How much money do we have? And we're talking about people, processes, and products, right? So people, hiring faculty who understand how to do this stuff, hiring people that can support faculty, hiring people that can support student affairs and support staff. We want to have tech people who speak WCAG, right? So that when you're having a conversation with people on campus that are, helping you along, ITS, e-learning, that they understand WCAG, they understand what perceivable, operable, all of those things mean. WCAG at the heart of it, it really gets into programming. I am not a person who knows how to go that in depth with that. I know how to use on the faculty side, the tools in order to make things meet the standards. But if you asked me anything about coding, I would probably say, I'm sorry, I need to leave right now. I have a meeting, because that is not my background. But we need to have people at our institutions that get this. This is always a tricky thing because the software companies are often not super happy about doing this for us. But if we can, before we adopt software, can we beta test it before we actually decide to make those decisions? It has been my observation that the people that can get away from that, or I'm sorry, can get away with that rather, are the 4 years. And that those of us at two-year institutions have a little bit more of a challenge getting the full-on version of that LMS to try it out before we make the decision. They give us their version that they give to every institution. Oh, sure, you can play around with it. Here it is. And it's not the same thing, right? You didn't get to really try it out. And so these are the things that we should be talking about and we should be thinking about, the way that we go about our business with our uh, software manufacturers, the people who sell the software. We need to be thinking a little bit about how we interact with them as well. So if we can be proactive versus reactive, well, now we're at the place where it's both. I mean, there's just not going to be things that are accessible. And so, of course, now reactive, the connotation is I'm not meeting it, so I have to now, right? Um, but we need to have a comprehensive training plan for all web content creators. So this is maintenance and onboarding. These are conversations that I've had with people at my institution, that when we're talking about people, like getting people compliant right now, we also need to think about how to keep them there. And when we hire new people, making sure that they're coming on board automatically, understanding what the requirements are. So that is what I have for you today. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and see here.
We'll open the floor to any question and answers. At the same time, I am going to share the certificate of attendance. So please make sure you take a picture of this. And I want to remind everybody, thank you, Debbie. I want to remind everybody that this is a series. This is the first of a series that Debbie is doing for us. We'll be back every 2 weeks through April 9th. And the next session will be about how to look at websites and pick the right websites. So Debbie's focus is going to be on things outside of any LMS. So that's to be very helpful. But if you have any questions.
And I'm always available. I usually put this at the end of my slides, and I forgot today, but mine is mine is easy as an easy thing. Dorsey at harford.edu. I always welcome. I love to hear from my colleagues at other institutions. We're all in the same boat, right? So please, if you have questions, a lot of times if I don't have the answer, I probably know how to get you the person who can have the right answer. All right.
Well,
Thank y'all for coming.
thank you
There,
all.